What if we told you that everything Israel feared the most has now become reality? That a single strike, calculated, fearless, and direct, has shaken the pillars of power in the Middle East. Today, you're not just watching a speech, you're witnessing the unraveling of an illusion. For decades, Israel stood as an untouchable force. But now, the script has flipped. Iran has moved from the shadows into the spotlight, defiant, deliberate, and deadly accurate. This isn't about missiles alone. It's about mindset, balance, and the birth of a new order. Stay with us, because every minute reveals a layer the media won't show you. By the end of this video, you will understand why this one moment in history could redefine the region and why Israel may never sleep the same again. This is more than a story. It's a warning. It's a shift. It's reality. Let's begin. Iran's recent direct strike represents a monumental shift in Middle Eastern geopolitics, particularly from the standpoint of Israel's national security doctrine. For decades, Israel's strategic depth, its perceived distance from direct threats, served as a psychological and military buffer. Iran, though rhetorically hostile, traditionally engaged Israel through asymmetric means, via proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon, or through militias in Syria and Iraq. This method allowed Tehran to exert pressure without bearing full responsibility. Israel, in turn, relied on this predictable pattern to formulate its defense strategies and deterrence campaigns. But all of that changed the moment Iran launched a direct, overt attack. This strike breached a red line many believed neither side was prepared to cross. Israel has always calculated that Iran's fear of direct confrontation would deter it from striking Israeli territory outright. That assumption has now been shattered. Iran didn't hide behind militias. It didn't use deniability. It put its name on the action. That matters. Not only did it undermine Israel's assumptions, but it also challenged the entire regional status quo. The idea that Israel could strike Iranian targets in Syria or even inside Iran without suffering a symmetrical response no longer holds true. Iran proved it has the capability, the intelligence infrastructure, and most importantly, the political will to escalate when its core interests are threatened. This direct confrontation signals that Tehran is no longer playing the long game from behind the curtain. It wants to be seen, to be feared, and to be respected as a regional power capable of independent action. For Israel, this breaches their one solid psychological and physical security perimeter. Strategic depth is not just about geography. It's about predictability and control over the escalation ladder. With this strike, Iran has disrupted that ladder, introducing a new level of uncertainty into the Israeli defense calculus. It also raises significant concerns for Israeli civilian morale. For years, the Israeli population was told that their country could prevent war from reaching their cities through technological superiority and preemptive tactics. Now, with sirens blaring in areas once considered safe, a new fear takes root. Israel must now operate in a reality where Tehran no longer needs intermediaries to project power. The barrier of distance has been overcome, and the psychological edge Israel once held has been deeply rattled. The Iron Dome has long been the pride of Israel's defense strategy, a symbol of technological superiority and a reassurance to its citizens that threats from the air could be neutralized with precision and speed. It has successfully intercepted countless rockets from Gaza and southern Lebanon, giving Israel a sense of invulnerability in the face of regional hostilities. However, Iran's recent strike tested this system in a way it had not been tested before. Unlike the crude rockets fired by militant groups, the Iranian strike involved more advanced weaponry, better targeting, and a level of coordination that the Iron Dome was not fully prepared for. The result was a rare breach, missiles that bypassed or overwhelmed the system, causing both physical and psychological damage. This breach didn't just damage buildings, it punctured the myth of total defense. The Israeli public, once confident that their skies were impenetrable, witnessed a moment where defense failed to meet the challenge. The military had to confront the reality that no system, however sophisticated, is foolproof when faced with a determined adversary wielding long-range, precision-guided munitions. Iran's ability to penetrate one of the most respected air defense systems in the world wasn't just a military achievement. It was a direct hit on Israel's sense of security. Strategically, this moment has wide-ranging implications. Iran essentially demonstrated that it could create a multi-layered challenge that strains Israel's defenses. If Hezbollah or other allied forces were to coordinate with Iran in a future conflict, the Iron Dome and other systems like David's Sling or Arrow would be tested far beyond their intended scope. The financial cost of operating these systems, already high, would become even more burdensome if Israel is forced into sustained, high-intensity engagements. As the psychological impact is equally profound. For Israel leadership, it creates pressure to respond with overwhelming force to restore deterrence. For the public, it raises doubts about the promises of complete safety that have long been part of national discourse. A single successful strike can echo louder than 100 intercepted ones, and Iran knew this. It didn't need to destroy entire cities. It only needed to prove it could. That proof now lingers in the minds of citizens and commanders alike. The Iron Dome, once a symbol of dominance, now stands as a reminder that even the strongest shields can be pierced. Psychological warfare has always been a key component of Israel's strategic posture in the Middle East. Its ability to project strength, control the narrative, and instill a sense of deterrence has allowed it to maintain an edge over adversaries who may match its aggression but not its perception management. For years, Israel succeeded in creating an image of overwhelming dominance. Its military actions were swift, calculated, and often unchallenged directly. Iran, on the other hand, was cast as the shadow player, using indirect means and proxies, avoiding direct confrontation to preserve its assets and deny Israel a reason to launch full-scale retaliation. This imbalance allowed Israel to psychologically dominate the theater of conflict. That era has been disrupted by Iran's direct and open strike. Iran's move marks a seismic shift in the psychological landscape. By choosing to confront Israel head-on, Tehran rejected the fear-based limitations imposed by previous conflicts. This wasn't a reckless act. It was a deliberate choice to reposition itself as an equal on the battlefield of perception. The message was clear. Iran is no longer a background force, relying solely on allies and covert operations. It is now a nation willing to bear the burden of open confrontation, if provoked beyond its threshold. This bold move unsettles Israel's psychological dominance as it introduces a new player into the mental space it once controlled almost unilaterally. For Israeli citizens, the psychological toll is undeniable. For decades, they've been told that deterrence works, that Israel's military superiority and preemptive actions would prevent enemies from getting too close. Iran's direct strike shatters that assumption, creating a sense of vulnerability that spreads faster than the physical damage itself. The psychological battlefield is no longer a one-way street. Iran has proven that it can not only absorb pressure, but return it in kind, publicly and effectively. From a regional perspective, this act emboldens Iran's allies and challenges the silent fears of Israel's enemies. If Tehran can strike without hiding, others may follow its lead. The myth of Israel's unchallengeable position is no longer intact. Tehran didn't just send missiles, it sent a signal. A calculated psychological maneuver that forces Israel to think twice before assuming the upper hand. The fear that once belonged solely to Iran and its network of allies now circulates within Israel's own streets, media, and military command rooms. The balance of psychological warfare has shifted, and with it, the perception of who truly holds the courage to act first. For many years, Israel maintained control over the timing, scale, and intensity of conflict across the region. It decided when tensions would escalate, how long confrontations would last, and when things would return to a state of uneasy calm. This monopoly on escalation gave Israel a distinct strategic advantage, allowing it to strike targets in Syria, bomb suspected nuclear sites, or respond to provocations with overwhelming force, all while assuming its adversaries would not dare to retaliate in equal measure. That power dynamic was shattered the moment Iran launched a direct and deliberate strike, not through proxies, but through its own military channels. Iran's decision to respond in kind marked a turning point in Middle Eastern conflict management. It signaled that Tehran no longer feels compelled to rely on indirect pressure or to sit back as Israel shapes the tempo of every confrontation. By launching a calculated strike, Iran introduced a new rule that it too has a say in when and how conflict unfolds. This act didn't just challenge Israeli air defenses, it challenged Israeli decision-making authority over regional warfare. Iran made it clear that the days of one-sided escalations are over. What makes this more impactful is the precision and clarity of Iran's retaliation. It wasn't a symbolic act or a desperate move. It was a carefully measured demonstration of capability, signaling that Iran can raise the stakes whenever it chooses. That kind of power projection forces Israel into a new mode of thinking. Every future operation, every covert strike, every incursion will now be weighed against the possibility of direct Iranian retaliation. The rules of engagement have changed, and with them, the cost of acting freely. This shift also weakens Israel's leverage and deterrence diplomacy. Previously, Israel could act boldly, knowing the threat of Iranian response was distant or diluted through intermediaries. Now it must consider the real possibility of facing Iran directly, not just on the battlefield, but on the global stage. Iran's move has forced international actors to reevaluate their crisis response models, adding complexity to situations that once had clear patterns. Israel no longer commands the rhythm of the conflict alone. Iran has proven it can strike back, strike effectively, and strike on its own terms, creating a dynamic where mutual caution replaces one-sided confidence. Iran's direct strike placed Israel's strongest international alliance, the one with the United States, under immediate strain. For decades, Washington has stood firmly behind Israel, offering military, diplomatic, and financial support in nearly every regional conflict. But Iran's bold retaliation introduced a level of complexity that even the U.S. was not fully prepared to handle. The strike forced the United States to navigate an uncomfortable middle ground, support Israel without triggering a wider regional war that could draw in American forces, damage diplomatic ties with Arab nations, and destabilize already fragile political dynamics across the Middle East. This balancing act exposed the limitations of U.S. influence in containing a rapidly evolving conflict between two heavily armed powers. The dilemma facing the U.S. was not just military but strategic. If Washington encouraged Israel to respond with overwhelming force, it risked an uncontrollable escalation, one that might pull Lebanon, Syria, and possibly Iraq into the flames. On the other hand, if it pressured Israel to show restraint, it risked looking weak in the eyes of adversaries and disappointing one of its most important allies. This tension revealed how Iran's calculated strike placed not only Israel in a reactive position, but also its most powerful protector. The U.S. had to tread carefully, offering reassurances to Israel while urging caution, knowing that a misstep could ignite a conflict far beyond the original battlefield. Iran's move also complicated Washington's relations with other regional players. Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, while wary of Iran, also feared a war on their doorstep. They watched the American response closely, measuring how much control the U.S. still holds over events it once confidently managed. Iran's action made it clear that deterrence no longer flows only from Washington or Tel Aviv. Tehran now has its own tools of influence, military, political, and psychological, that can shape the decisions of superpowers and shift diplomatic conversations in real time. This moment underscored a broader truth. The era where the U.S. could single-handedly contain Iran or dictate the tempo of conflict in the region is slipping away. Iran's bold strike forced Washington into a reactive posture, revealed its vulnerability to rapid escalations, and created an uncomfortable reality where even America's staunchest efforts may not prevent further confrontation. The shift in power dynamics is no longer theoretical, it's playing out in real time, reshaping alliances, strategies, and perceptions across the world stage. Iran's direct military strike against Israel did more than retaliate against a specific provocation. It fundamentally altered how the entire region perceives the balance of power. For years, Israel was widely recognized, even by its adversaries, as the unmatched military power in the Middle East. its technological edge, intelligence network, and ability to execute precision operations made it seem untouchable. Arab states and rival powers often kept their distance, choosing either quiet diplomacy or proxy-based conflict to avoid full-scale confrontation. Iran's strike, however, broke this long-standing psychological and strategic barrier, demonstrating that Israel is not beyond reach and that Iran possesses the capability and boldness to confront it directly. This action was carefully observed by regional actors such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Egypt. Many of these nations have had complex relationships with both Israel and Iran, and their policies have often depended on who appeared to hold the upper hand. Iran's decision to abandon proxy warfare in favor of a direct and openly claimed strike gave those nations a reason to reevaluate the regional hierarchy. Suddenly, Tehran no longer looked like a reactive force hiding behind militias. It looked like a state willing to stand face-to-face with the region's most feared military power. What this does is shift the regional equation. It signals to Israel's adversaries and neutral players alike that Iran is no longer playing second-tier politics. It has moved into a new category, one that challenges Israeli supremacy, not just in rhetoric or influence, but in direct action. That shift makes it harder for Israel to maintain the image of being the dominant power capable of deterring all threats through strength alone. The attack undermined decades of regional deterrence theory built around Israel's superiority and introduced the idea that others might follow Iran's example in refusing to be sidelined or intimidated. This rebalancing of power is not just symbolic. It has real-world consequences for how alliances will form, how military planning will be done, and how diplomacy will unfold. Countries that once quietly supported Israeli operations out of fear of Iran's rise may now consider hedging their bets or even opening cautious dialogues with Tehran. In a region where perception often shapes policy as much as military capacity, Iran's direct strike changed the rules of engagement and rewrote the unwritten laws of dominance that once placed Israel above open challenge. The strike has been made. The line has been crossed. What was once unimaginable is now undeniable. Iran has changed the game. Israel, long shielded by military supremacy and regional intimidation, now faces a new era where its dominance is no longer unquestioned. The Iron Dome faltered. The psychological edge slipped. The control over escalation vanished. And even its most powerful allies hesitated, caught in the tension of a new and dangerous balance. Iran's bold move sent a message not just to Israel, but to the world. It will no longer operate from the shadows. It has declared itself a frontline force, reshaping alliances, reordering perceptions, and injecting fear where once there was confidence. This is a moment of reckoning, a reset of power, courage, and consequence. In this rapidly shifting landscape, one truth remains clear. The Middle East is no longer under the sole command of one voice, one fist, or one flag. The age of unchecked dominance is over. The age of consequences has begun. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey of truth and turning points. May this message open your eyes, challenge your thoughts, and awaken the spirit of awareness within you. Stay bold, stay informed, and keep seeking clarity in a world clouded by noise. Good luck on your path, and never stop watching the signs.